I am so excited to really get to know on a deeper level my dear friend Chris Wyatt. He's an incredible business owner and executive. I've seen him move from really focusing on 17 years as a marketing and advertising expert into now a really high level business owner that acquires companies, he optimizes companies. He's personally helped me. I would not be where I'm at in my business without his expertise in marketing and business. It's been a game changer for me, and he's become a really good friend. So I'm just really excited to shed light on what it takes to achieve this kind of success at such an early age. And I mean, you've got a family, you've got three kids, you've got so much on your plate, and you still keep playing at a high level. So, Chris, you're someone I admire, and I haven't had the opportunity to have this conversation. So I'm just so excited, and thank you for taking the time today.
No, absolutely. Happy to be here. Humbled by the intro. But yeah, happy to dive into this topic. I think it's a fun topic. I think it's a top of mind topic for a lot of people on, you know, um, I guess the cost of success, you
Yep.
know, and what that is and what that looks like.
It's there's always a price, right? And so tell us, where did you start out with your entrepreneur journey? Because I know I've seen your story. You come from very humble beginnings.
Yeah. So, yeah, through high school, I know now I know we're getting a little bit older now, but it's not too far ago, too far back, I guess. Um, so when I was in high school, early 2000s, mid 2000s, I graduated in '06. My mom was making like 14 grand a year. She was making $8.59 an hour. And so just we were living in a one bedroom basement apartment you know, um, in someone's house, someone else's house. We were helping pay their mortgage. Um, and so, my dad hustled. They were obviously been divorced. Well, not obviously, but they were divorced. So it was just me and my mom, and through high school. And so that's kind of where it started. But even before that, very humble. Dad hustled blue collar, just picking up odd jobs to make things happen. I guess I learned the hustle early on. My dad did, paint jobs and sheetrock and plastering jobs on the weekend, at night, and I would go along. And obviously, sometimes I would help, sometimes I wouldn't, depend on the job or the house that he was in. But I learned a lot about it, and puttying and stucco and popcorn ceilings and all that. So I saw that stuff early on, and I think subconsciously and unconsciously that was ingrained in me that, like, hey, you gotta have a little hustle. If you want to make it happen, like, you gotta do these things. And so for me, like, that was the norm growing up, um, picking up odd jobs to make things happen. So that's where it all started, really, kind of the work ethic. But it didn't really kick off until about 2007 in college. I stumbled into a guy outside a movie theater. Long and short, he was like, "Hey, you looking to make extra money?" And obviously, I'm in college. The answer is yes. Broke college kid. Ended up being a company called Quickstar, which at the time was basically a North American division of a company called Amway, which is a network marketing company. And that kind of started it. But I very quickly learned that you're not gonna the 3 foot rule of talking to everybody within 3 feet of you, and going to Barnes and Noble in the business book section, and you know talking to random strangers and trying to do form, family, occupation, recreation, what's the N, motivation, doing form on people. And it helped me with interpersonal and interpersonal skills, but it wasn't effective. And so the aha that I had was is, why can't I just put a product or service in front of people who are actually looking for it? Like, what, isn't that a novel idea? And so that's where I learned, to transition in 2008, I learned about websites, SEO, blogging, affiliate marketing. Oh, I can make money off of somebody else's product without having my own brand. All I got to do is this thing called launch jacking, where you throw up a Google ad around somebody's product launch, and you're an affiliate, and they click on your link to get your bonus. And like, there's all these really cool strategies. So that's where it started. And then I transitioned in 2010 into client management, landing my first personal client. in 2010. And so, finishing up my 14th year of client work and in-house marketing and advertising. Um, and, have transitioned, like you mentioned, from there into acquiring a business, and I'm looking to acquire another one this year. I just actually had a call before this with a marketing agency that I'm looking at right now. I
Nice.
got uh, two more sims that are coming my way, which are business overviews that I'll be looking at today. I've looked at probably about 50 deals this week. So, um,
Wow.
so I'm fairly active with looking into scaling. So that's a good summary. I could talk a lot about that and go into a lot of avenues there, but I'll let you lead the question. But that's the summary. That's been 14 years in the making. I've worked in-house big brands. I've managed $1.5 million a month in advertising spend that was run profitably. There are a lot of people like, oh, it's one thing to run ad spend, it's run another one to do it. Oh, no, it was profitable. We had to make payroll, and we ran on a um, very tight net margin kind of a calculation. And so we had to turn profit every 7 days on the ads. So like we were very, very, very tight window. Um, did that profitably. I've worked in, businesses that have been as large as 9 figures, multi 9 figure businesses and entities, in the call center space, managing multi 8 figure a year average, how being part of a team, or not just me solely, managing multi 8 figure year budgets, um, seeing that ins and outs, and then all the way down to $500 a month, clients, $300 a month clients. So I've seen everything in between. I've seen what works, what doesn't work. I've been able to see, I've had the depth and the breadth of experience to see kind of what works and what doesn't, both for organizations being hired and as a consultant, freelancer, and also now, having an agency in a consulting boutique. And then now, again, owning entities that already have staff.
You've got your hands full, so I can't help but like bring this up. How do you keep you were in a hustler mindset when you're literally doing everything. Now you're in a mindset of I'm buying companies. How do you make that bridge and how do you get out of the grind? Like, how did you come up out of that grind where you're in the hamster wheel and you're really just getting paid for your time? Like, what point did you break out of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I don't think we ever truly break out of it.
Mhm.
I think it's always a constant flow. And so, in preparation for meeting with you today, I wrote down, I took a lot of notes. And so, because I have a bunch of thoughts on the topic. And so, I want to share with you a few things. You know, we mentioned already the cost of success. There's a price that you have to pay, right? There's a saying that someone said, when you step up to the when you step up to the counter of success in life, expect to pay full retail. You're not going to get a discount somehow of the price that needs to be paid to be successful. Um, so with that, there's a saying that I use all the time. I've used it with you. I said the path is math. The path is math, right? And so to be able to kind of have that come up without sacrificing mental health and still having some level of balance and joy is you have to reverse engineer what your success is going to be. Now, I'm not talking some frou-frou kind of willy-nilly, let's feel good. Your success is not the same as somebody else's success. I mean, it is partially true, right? Because maybe your idea of success is, you would like to get to a place to where, the average American makes $55,000 a year. Maybe you want to hit 6 figures for the first time. That's success for you, while simultaneously not working more than 40 hours a week, being able to go to your kids' games and be their baseball coach, or go on weekend excursions once or twice or once every few months, maybe just go once a year on a week-long vacation, make a certain amount to feel comfortable, have the nice car, have the house, maybe purchase your first home. Those are a lot of the first goals. I hit some of those about 5 years ago, purchased my first home. And it's crazy. Like when you go through those, your brain expands, right? Because it's like a rubber band. Once you stretch a rubber band, it never truly goes back to its original size, right?
So true.
And so as you grow, your capacity grows. So I think it's important though, that as you grow, that you reference what that equation is. What's your success? What is your end goal? What are you trying to initiate? Because you're going to have phases of, your goals are going to change. Because once you hit phase one, what you think your real goal is, like, oh, I want to make 6 figures. Then you get to 6 figures, and you're like, man, that's really not that much money. Like it's natural. It's human nature. Like anybody who's an entrepreneur will tell you this journey. Anybody who's an employee will tell you this. Like once you start to make a little bit more, it's so be like, oh, you keep your lifestyle the same, dude. It's human nature. Like it's like walking by the best brownie or the best pasta or the best steak in the world when you're hungry. Like you're gonna want to try it, right? Like you're gonna want to try the new car. Now there are some people that have an amazing amount of discipline, right? And they don't give into those things. But the majority of people are. And so I'm going to speak to
Yep.
the majority of people and those that aren't those people. I pat you on the back because I didn't have that discipline. When I increased my revenues and I increased my profits, so did my lifestyle. Right? I saved a little
Me
bit.
too.
I'm gonna be honest. I saved a little bit, but like I bought a nice house, right? But that nice house also, made me several $100,000 when I flipped it and sold it a few years later. So there's now I got lucky. I'm not going to say I didn't get lucky. I got a little lucky with, the COVID boom and low interest rates and, but what's the saying, luck is when opportunity and preparedness meet. Like if I wouldn't have bought the house, if I'd have listened to Dave Ramsey, if I'd have listened to some other guys about like, oh, you should only get a house that's a certain amount, blah, 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 it stretched me. That initial mortgage stretched me. I wasn't used to paying that. It was, 50 to 60% higher than what my rent was. But I was able to afford it. Obviously, I qualified for a loan, right? So it just was different for me. So the path is math. You got to reverse engineer like the lifestyle that you want. And I knew what my number was. I knew I needed to make 12 to $15,000 a month and net somewhere between 8 and 10 of that, right? And that for me, I knew, okay, that's roughly going to be. I charge about $2,000 a month for my agency services, my consulting services. At the time was my average. My average now is higher, as you know.
I know.
And so,
I was like, hold on.
as you know, and so at the time was like, that's 15 grand top line, or it was actually more than that. But like, I'm just saying, I'm using this as an example. I need to have 7 clients, right? 7, 8 clients. I've had as many as 20. I can tell you that is brutal with how I operate. Because when people hire me, they hire me. They don't hire a junior level person. So I've learned where my sweet spot is. And so that's kind of the cost of success. It's that ebb and flow. So does that answer your question? Like having a number or having a vision of what you're trying to do and then reverse engineer financially what that looks like. Okay, I want a house that's, whatever. Like, listen, you can complain about the market conditions all you want, but at the end of the day, it's a number. So like, let's make it non-emotional. Let's make it non-emotional and something that you're fighting against the machine and say, okay, how can I? Right? How can I afford a $600,000 house? Because that's the house that I want. That's the house that I need. I've got a couple kids. I need a 2-car garage because I have 2 cars. I live in the state of Florida where it's windy all the time. I'm worried about, branches or trees or whatever. I want to protect them. I need a 2-car garage. I need a half-acre of land because I don't want to be feeling like I'm sitting on top of somebody. Like whatever the case may be, just reverse engineer what that needs to look like. What does my debt need to look like? I don't think people sit down enough to understand what the financial view of what their success needs to what it needs to look like, right? Do I make enough money? And if I don't make enough money, they go to somebody like you and say, hey, I have a job, I'm making 80 grand, but I need to make 130 to get to the lifestyle that I want. Can I get your help doing that? How do I find a job that's 130? And then you have a process for that. When people come to me, they're like, hey, I want to bring on a certain amount of clients. Okay, cool. Do you know how much it costs you right now to bring on a client? Oh, no, I don't. Okay, well, cool. Well, how much are you spending? How many clients are you bringing in? Oh, well, X and X. Okay, cool. That's how much it's costing you to acquire a customer. What are you charging? I'm charging this. Okay, cool. Do you know what your margin is on that? Well, no, not really. Well, okay, tell me how much it costs you to fulfill, or what are you paying somebody to help you fulfill on that service? And then it's all numbers. Like my service, I know down to the dollar how many images I can create, how like I know to the T what my service as a product, right, produces in gross margin and net margin every month. I just know that, and I know how much I can fulfill. And so most people don't have a breakdown, whether a job or a business owner, what that path looks like for them. But it would take them less than 2 hours to figure that out. So I'm spending a lot of time on this because that's the crux of everything. If you know where you're starting from, the vehicle, becomes clear, the modality becomes more clear, and the opportunities for what's going to help you get there become more clear.
I like how practical you are because so many people overlook the simple power of having a financial goal. And I know every high achiever I know has financial targets monthly, if not annually. So it's interesting that you go there because it's such a simple thing to dismiss. But when you really sit down and visualize that number, and the path becomes a lot more obtainable. So thank you for sharing that. I do want to shift gears a little bit and go towards that, back to what you said, the cost of success. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear from you. You're now up in the top 1%. You did not come from there. So what were a couple big sacrifices that you think you made that most just wouldn't make?
Ooh. I don't think people understand the level of stress um, that comes with being and wanting to get to where you want to go to.
Yep.
I would say that's the biggest. I would say of all things, I would say that's the biggest cost. I've been fortunate enough to where you know missing school events or missing this or that um, for the sake of the business. Uh, I gave up a couple things in college, a couple conference championships, a big trip to NY to go start the network marketing company I was at. I do look back and think that was kind of stupid. I felt like it was a cost I needed. So there are costs that are needed to be paid, and there are costs that don't need to be paid. And then there are costs that shouldn't be paid, right? So I'm
Yep.
going to say that again. There are costs that are paid, there are costs that shouldn't be paid, um, and there's costs that need to be paid. And so the costs that need to be paid is you have to become an expert at whatever you're doing. That needs to be paid. You need to be able you need to have a skill or a service where you can charge a good rate at a good value, right? You know that I'm big on value. I'm big
Yep.
on value, right? You don't want to just charge for more just for the sake of charging more, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that teach but you need to be able to know what those are. And so for me, I've been fortunate enough. I knew that early on because I knew what the path was. I knew what the math was. And so I knew what I was willing to give up. Now, I've been fortunate. I haven't really given up like kids' birthdays and stuff like that. Like birthdays are really big in my family, and my
Yeah.
family is not my family, like historically, my family unit now, my wife and kids, we're really big on birthday. We don't celebrate Christmas. We don't celebrate Halloween. We don't celebrate those things. So um, we make birthdays the thing. So everything that normal people would celebrate, we basically bundle that into somebody's birthday because I believe that's literally the biggest holiday in anyone's life. I truly believe that because it's a celebration of you existing, of you
That's
coming into the
right.
world, having opportunities. Like that is the day, not Christmas. Yeah, listen, I love celebrating Jesus' birth, but that's a topic for another day. Um, I believe that energy needs to be spent there. So I haven't sacrificed that. I haven't really sacrificed those. But what I do in place of that, and that's a price I'm not willing to sacrifice, right? Have I not been there a couple times for little things? Sometimes I'll miss a practice for going to see a client or something like that. But I'm still there 80, 90% of the time, right? Like I'm not giving up all of that to go build a business. And I'm also teaching my kids like, hey, I'm not gonna be there for the practice so that I can actually be there for the game, right?
Yeah.
And so like there are some give and takes there, right? And so I would say on that, the biggest thing I give up is, and you've probably seen it, is I turn into a night owl. I've had to work
Yep.
late hours.
Oh yeah.
So sleep and stress, the SNS, the those are the things that I have had that have been weird, in my life because I've had to meet deadlines. You've seen me say, I said, hey, Olivia, I know we're on a tight deadline. I'll make sure it's done before I go. I won't say a deadline. I won't say a time. I'll say it'll be done before I go to sleep. And you're
Yep.
like, and I think you get now what that means. It basically means if it's 3 o'clock and one, I'm going to make sure it gets done before I go to sleep because I know that my day is absolutely slammed. But that was a price that that's a price I'm willing to pay. And it's a price that you should pay. I believe that there are times you need to put those in. I'm trying to get, we'll probably transition into balance and harmony here in a bit, but that's the price that I paid was some late nights, figuring it out, financial stress, you
Yep.
know, um, cash flow, stress,
Oh yeah.
like, you get pinched. There's times that I've taken some very expensive capital just so that it was expensive from a balance sheet perspective, a profit loss perspective. But honestly, it actually gave me some of my peace of mind back, right? Because what's the price on that? So I went and borrowed some money, and I had to pay back a larger amount of that than I needed to or should have, but it was a price I was willing to pay to help get some peace of mind from a cash flow perspective. So I could actually still be in a headspace to make really good sound decisions during that period on how the business was operating, how I was fulfilling for clients. And so the price that I paid has been more so on the sleep and stress of the weight of some of those financial burdens, um, and less on kind of my family dynamic. I've been pretty good with the family. It's not perfect, obviously. We're always working towards something better. But I was able to wake up and see my kid crawl for the first time. I was there on vacation when my first kid had his first steps. I was there for all of our kids' first steps,
Awesome.
because I was home, like I had the flexibility. I wouldn't say freedom. Freedom is another term. Well, some people say it's semantics, but it's not. Everyone wants freedom, but really what they mean is flexibility. You still got to work, right? Like freedom is like you don't have to work,
Minute to
but
you have a boss, it's your clients, right? They're counting on you.
correct. But I have flexibility, right? Like they
Yeah.
don't care if you don't care if I work at 5 in the morning or 5 in the afternoon. You don't care. Like as long as stuff gets done,
Right.
right? As
Right.
long as the timeline is reasonable, right? If I say 3 days, you don't care if in those 3 days I'm working nights or morning. You don't care,
No.
right? And so I do have that flexibility.
Yep.
Hey, I'm at an event, so like I know that either I got to get the work done before the event starts, during the event, during a session that I don't like, or after the event is over, I've got to go back to my hotel room and jam out on that before I can go back to any networking, right? I have flexibility to go to the event, but I still sometimes have timelines that I have to hit. Either I get it done before I leave, sometimes something pops up, I get it done the day. So for me, the cost and sacrifice of that success has been just longer hours. Hey, I help with bedtime routines. I remember, and I miss it, helping my kids, you know, I feel like that's a whole other topic for another day. As I've grown older, I appreciate the dad father thing more than I did when I was in my mid 20s and 30s. I think that's just a guy,
Yeah.
as we get older, a legacy thing. Like as you get older, you start to be like, oh snap, like, what am I leaving? What
Yeah.
impact am I leaving? And so that's changed for me. But like, doing their baths at night, like I miss that. That was fun. But I was able to do that. Like I don't what I'd rather have the emotion of missing that than missing actually doing it than having the emotion of missing it altogether,
Oh yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
And so for me, the sacrifice to actually have those sometimes was I would just work late at night. I'd say, hey, hang out with my wife for a little bit. We'd have dinner, wrap up the night. We'd have kind of a connecting time together. And I say, hey, you know what? I know you're going to want to be off to bed or you're going to want to watch a show. I got to go back to the office, home office, and and jam out on a few client things. And that's been something that she's been cool with. Some nights I go to bed, we go to bed at the same time, but there's nights that she knows that like I'm not going to be able to,
Yeah.
right? But she also knows that I can go to our, adventure trip on a Friday, So it's like there's a price to be paid, but I feel like fortunately I've had really good coaches and mentors and people that help center me and understand the path is math. I mean, the reason that I'm doing this is so I have that flexibility to be able to do those things. It doesn't make sense to build that flexibility, and I've seen this where people get that flexibility, but then they have this massive fear that if they don't continue it at that same way, they don't learn how to adapt into the new model that they've actually built, and they're working from a fear base of like I've got to do it how I've always done it,
Yeah.
and then they actually miss out on the thing that they actually work to actually have flexibility for. And I've been fortunate to have mentors that kind of help me make that shift.
Mhm.
without losing too much. Again, is it perfect? No, but I'm hitting 70 to 80%, 85% of what I really set out to achieve. And so I even have to have, you have to have grace in that
Yeah, of
cost of success because you're
course.
not going to do it perfect,
No,
right? And so you have to give yourself a little bit of grace in that so that you don't have a mental health crisis. So you don't have, a
absolutely.
breakdown in your happiness. So again, I could talk about this all day. I love this stuff.
And
So
you have actually helped me because I remember we've had some conversations because the second time scaling a company, it's like it's never fast enough. I should be there already. What's going, like, there's less appreciation. And you keep bringing me back to that gratitude of, do you realize like how well you're doing? And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is a joke, right? So, how have you managed that? Like really, I think you have a sense of appreciation too and awareness because in this entrepreneur world, like we could always feel small because there's always people making more money and flashing bigger months, right? And so it's so hard to stay center and like hungry, but also satisfied. Like, could you talk about balancing those emotions?
yeah, I think it comes back to the math equation. I know it seems like I'm trying to rationalize emotion, but you can regulate emotion by managing expectations. One of the things that I feel like I do well in my client and boutique consulting business, I'm really good at managing expectations, right? Which goes back to what
Yeah.
you're saying with having gratitude. Like the reason most of the time that we're dissatisfied or unsatisfied or unfulfilled in life is because we have an expectation of something that we have no frame of reference for. We have no previous equation for. Like we don't know. I know that sounds frou-frou, but it's not. So let me add some tangibility to it. When it comes to business, when you look at publicly traded companies or companies that are growing, it's considered good to grow at an 8 to 12% clip annually. Okay.
Wow. Yeah, that's
And
true.
you just kind of did the like, oh, really? Like that's nothing, right? Because in the entrepreneur world, when we're going from 0 to 1, or we're going from 1 to 10, and that could be that 100,000, that could be first dollar, it could be $10, it could be on our scale, it's probably millions at that stage. But if you're going from 0 to 1 million, like that growth, you know, if you went from 100 grand to like 120, yeah, that doesn't feel like a whole lot. But like what happens is we go from like making 300 and then we go to 600. That's 100% growth in 1 year, right?
Mhm.
Like, yes, it's a smaller scale than a big company, but that's 100% growth. That's a
Mhm.
lot of growth. And so I guarantee you going from 300 to $600,000 in sales, there's a lot of things that you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to learn infrastructure. You have to learn the timing of hiring people. When do you hire somebody at 300 to 600, right? When does it actually make it worth it to have that person take something off your plate so you get your time back?
Yeah.
Um, Dan Martell has a great book called Buy Back Your Time. Talks about like, when do you hire an assistant? When do you hire somebody to take some tasks off your plate? We've heard of the 4-hour work week, which is essentially all about basically hiring VAs, virtual assistants in like the Philippines or India or somewhere else in the world where they can get a good local wage, but in comparison to US, it's still significantly cheaper than a US based worker, and they speak good English, they still have good technical skills. And so um, full circle is you got to have a good frame of reference for what is good growth, right? And so for me, the thing I've seen with you and I've seen with myself too is like just having a center mass on, hey, listen, you're crushing it. You've grown from, you went from, not you, just saying in general, like if you go from 200 grand to 500 grand, then 500 grand to 800 grand, and then 800 grand to to 1.5 million bucks, over a span of 4 years. Think about that. In the span of 4 years, in the span of going to college, like again, frame of reference, going to school, when you go to school, right? 4 years, right? And you come out with a degree. But have you actually have anything from like income that's actually changed in those 4 years? Not really. You have now the ability to show on paper that you have some work ethic that can be transferred into a job, right? If
You
you
don't have a
translate
degree,
that,
right? Just for context, you didn't get a degree, right?
no, I'm like 4 classes away. So
Oh,
I plan on finishing because they're all like Bible classes. So I'm like,
cool.
I would love to actually go back and just have focused study on those Bible classes. But no, I never finished. I tried a bunch of times. I used, those loans to kind of float me through some lean years where I went to school and then I took out more loan money than I needed just so I could have living expenses. While I was in school slash also trying to grow a business, um, which is again another story for another day. But um, the frame of reference of understanding that like that 4 year period in college, right? You didn't make any money. Now let's go out in the real world. If you apply those same 4 years in your business, you went from 200 grand to $1.5 million in revenue. Like that's wild because a 4 year degree doesn't get you anywhere close to that. Now you got a 7 figure business, and let's say it's running at a 20 or 30% margin, a decent margin, net margin. You've just made 300,000. 30% would be 450,000, 300 to $450,000 net
Mhm.
net, and you probably paid yourself a little salary in there as well. So you just made $400,000 to $500,000 in maybe $600,000 in a year. Dude,
Mhm.
that's doctor money. That's
And
doctor money.
and let me
That's
be honest, like when we're like we get into this crazy like ego zone, because like when like you said earlier, when that rubber band expands and you know what it feels like to make a certain income and you're starting over and building again, or you're just not there, it's like it's so hard to be satisfied when you're rebuilding. And so I'd love for you to talk when you have a bad month or whatever it is, how do you not internalize that and kind of just stay detached? Like you seem so logical and rational, which is fantastic because it keeps you grounded. But I'd love to hear, how do you stay in that headspace?
I wrote down again. I wrote down a bunch of notes because I felt like these questions would segue into these things pretty well. But I think another thing that's really helps, outside of just knowing businesses grow at 8 to 12% is considered good, right? And so
Yeah,
you see a lot in the entrepreneur space that people are having success are growing faster than that, or
yeah,
they don't give themselves grace in that. Hey, listen, you were at 550 this year, you went to 650, you went to 600 or 650 this year. Oh, I'm not growing fast enough. It's like, homie, you just grew by 20 to 25% this year.
hmm,
You grew by 22%. Like that's nothing to sniff your nose at because if you grow by 30% a year over 3 years, you just doubled your company. That's
yeah,
crazy. Like, so having that frame of reference, I'm trying to go back to your question though, like, um, the frame for this was, how do you keep that when you expand, how do you keep that perspective? I think another thing outside of having the perspective on what a true business actually grows at, like a bigger business grows at, and keeping you grounded when you're actually growing faster than that, um, is understanding that there are seasons in every business, right? When you go through a slow period, right? You know, there's scripture that talks about the sowing and reaping, right?
yeah,
But nobody talks about the winter. I'm going through a personal winter right now where I'm considering this to be a recalibration year for me, which is wild because I actually have a business that's exploding right now. But personally, I'm going through kind of recalibrating and kind of getting in better harmony in all areas of what harmony for what I want for myself. So I'm kind of recalibrating my path as math. I'm recalibrating my center of what I want because it's changed. It changes, right? In different phases. I've got older kids now. I've been married now for you know uh, 13 years, 12 years, going into our 13th year of marriage, been together for 14. And so the things I'm trying to accomplish now are slightly different than what they were 2 or 3 years ago. And so um, I'm in a winter. And so I think what happens is we don't identify in our growth when we're in a winter because we always feel like we need to be in harvest season. We always need to be grow, 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 grow.
yeah.
And it's just not natural.
That's not natural.
It's not natural. And the thing is, when you frame it from a seasonality perspective, people are like, oh yeah, I get it, right? But it's
Yeah,
like most people don't identify. They try to make where people get the most friction and frustration and stress in their business, I feel, is when they're in a winter season and they're not willing to embrace it. And they
yeah.
try to just like muscle it and white knuckle it and just like they feel like it has to be spring and summer all the time and fall
That would
harvest all
be,
the time, right? You need to rest, like and by rest, that doesn't mean you don't work. It just means that, hey, maybe like you pull back to 30 hours a week, 25, 30 hours a week for, 3 or 4 months so that like you can like not be stressed out so much. So you can get an extra hour of sleep. Instead of 7 hours, you're getting 8.5 hours of sleep, right? You know, because you actually have those aha moments, those moments of enlightenment when you have a fresh mind and a fresh brain. Everyone's like, hey, when I have a good night's sleep, I think clear, I think better. Like, well, duh, like you gave your body rest. And so, when you're sick, guess what? What do? You sleep and you rest, you take medicine, you refuel, right? You take your liquids, you take your vitamin C, you make sure you take your vitamins in that moment, right? So I think it's two things. You need to have the frame of reference, the path is math. I think you need to understand what your life vision is. There's a concept called the drift. Um, I forgot the author's name. Well-known author, used to be part of a publishing, used to be the president of a publishing company, and he's got this book called The Drift, and he talks about like what happens with people is, and why they get dissatisfied with not hitting their goals, is they get caught up in the whirlwind or the drift of everyday life or everyday running a business,
Yeah.
and they don't have something like written out right in front of their face that helps realign them and recenter them. I like to say, I'm a music guy, so like recalibration or retuning. You tune a piano. Over time, those strings get out. They get out of tune, and you
Yeah.
have to retune them. And so, like, I'm in that right now. This year, I'm allowing myself and forcing myself to, hey, Chris, dude, you're in a retune season. And listen, like, you've made good music. You've done good things. The record is out there already, but the instrument that you use needs to be retuned before you try to write a new song. And
Yeah.
so otherwise it's going to sound really bad, and it's going to be distorted, and it's going to be ugly, and it's not going to sound great. And so um, you got to have that center map. I'm going to go back to the path is back, going back to having a goal, having writing out your values, what your mission is, how do you see that your day, what does your day look like, right? It's not just money. It's like, what does my day look like? And then my day looks like this. Who do I need on my team? Not the what's the book by Simon Sinek? It's not the what, it's the who. Like who do I need on my team around me to help me accomplish that?
Hmm.
And so um, full circle, keeping things calibrated, having a good sense of gratitude, and just having a good perspective on what season you're in helps a lot with understanding and limiting your frustration and managing those expectations around where you are. And then saying, hey, listen, you know what? I don't know if I'm in a winter, but I definitely don't feel like I'm in summer and fall, like I'm about to make a harvest. And so giving yourself grace for a couple weeks to give yourself space. Maybe you work a normal 9 to 5 or whatever your hours are Monday to Thursday, and maybe you take Friday and you go get a massage every day for the next 6 weeks. You're like, oh, but it's $100. Who cares? That $600 will be the best $600 you'll spend over the next 6 weeks in your life and in your business, just to give yourself space and a little bit of self care,
Yeah.
so that you can like revitalize, right? Like, I'm biblically based. Like, there's a reason for a Sabbath. The Sabbath wasn't made for God; it was made for man. Why? Because we need rest. Our
Yeah.
bodies just don't function without proper sleep and rest, and that's needed. And so,
Let
hopefully,
me
that's
ask you
helpful.
this because there's so much to unpack, and I'm like, I want to really hit this last question as I think the most important one. And that's, as you think about the whole come up journey, what were a couple of the biggest decisions that accelerated you or shifts?
Oof. Oof. Um, Good question. I mean, I have an answer for that, but I have a note here that's going to summarize. That's going to summarize everything we've talked about so far. Um, there's a passage in Scripture, Ecclesiastes 3:1-8, essentially alludes to there's a time and a season for everything. There is inevitability of change. Um, Things are going to change, marketplaces are going to change, trends are going to change. We see it all the time, especially TikTok. It's gotten even faster. Trends change even faster now, in some regards. And so I think if people understand there's a time for everything and there's a season for everything, that is super helpful. in reference to their goals. And so taking those things in stride is super helpful, managing those expectations. But then to the question on what were the big shifts for me, these were the big shifts. The path is map was a big shift for me.
Mhm.
Really reverse engineering how I wanted my life. I think another big one was in 2017. I stopped really trying to grow my agency. Um, why? Because I started to realize that like I am, as you've seen, like I'm really good when somebody has something that's proven that I can tinker with, right? 0 to 1, a rocket going from 0 to 1 uses like a Falcon 9. I looked this up. A Falcon 9 uses 90% of its fuel is used during the initial stages of launch. So
Wow.
that initial ramp up period is going to be the hardest that you're going to use majority of your time, energy, expenditure, resources, both time and money and connections during launch. And so for me, I was like, man, and here's the thing. Some people love that phase. There are people who love startups. They love getting the proof of concept and then they get bored. I am not that person. I've realized I don't enjoy that. I don't work well. I don't work well. I have done it and I have had
Of course.
successes doing 0 to 1 with people. But I do my best work when there's something there already tangible for me to work from. I'm a
Yeah.
good, I think I've even told you, I'm a good copy editor, not a good copy writer. I'm
Yeah.
a good, optimizer, not a creator. I'm a good innovator, right? Not a good idea, initial, like, not just ideas. Ideas, yeah, I got lots of ideas, but I'm not the person that gets it from 0 to 1. I'm the person that helps you go from 1 to 10,
Yeah.
right? I'm really good at that. And so when I realized that, again, as part of the path is math, once I realized that, that was big.
Mhm.
Another nugget was I was at a conference and this guy, Alex Sharfin, spoke and he talked about the Hall of Fame. And he talked about like, why are you feeling resistance in your business? And this is actually a little bit different than seasonality. It's a super big mindset shift, kind of like the rubber band. Um, he basically gave the analogy of that essentially you have your off season, you got your regular season, you build up your stats, and your stats are kind of like your years in business, right? And then you've got this career that you've built, right? Like you've got a business model that gives you the flexibility and the freedom. You write down all your things, your drift, your core, your value statement, what you're trying to get to. And for most people, it's 6 figures, time freedom, do what I want, when I want, with who I want, right? Those are tend to be the main pillars that most people have. I want
Yeah.
to make 6 figures. I want to work for myself, and I want to do it whenever I want, whether digital nomad, no digital nomad. I've got a family. I want to just have more time. Those are the 3 to 5 things most people say. Okay, and then everyone has kind of one or two unique ones, but those are the core things. And so what happened for me is I realized I had achieved those things and I was wondering why I wasn't willing to go hire more people, or I was feeling so much friction, like oh man, like the anxiety that I would get and the stress level that I would get from like the idea of hiring and building out more SOPs and like going hiring a sales rep. Like, oh, that's so like I know it sounds like a baby first world problems, but like I didn't want to do it. And I was like, why don't I want to do it? I want to do it. I want to grow. And it was just like, well, Chris, you've hit your Hall of Fame. You've subconsciously and unconsciously set a goal and you've hit it. And your subconscious and unconscious hasn't realigned with the new vision because it's still running on the old
Mhm.
OS, its own operating system. The old operating system was the initial goal. And you haven't written out a new vision and written a contract to yourself on the new vision yet. And to create a new Hall of Fame, right? And so I was like, oh, dude, that's so good. That makes so much sense. I have achieved all the things I wanted. I do have the flexibility. I do make good money. I do have the things that I was looking for. I do have a nice house and I do have the nice car. And, for me, it was a Range Rover and it was a nice house with a pool and, a little bit of land and a nice community and a little HOA with, an event center that has a nice pool. Like I had a pool in my house, I had a pool event center. Like nice community, in Florida, no state income tax. Like I had it. And so like I was wondering why don't I want to grow it anymore? And it's because like I realized I had gotten that. And I'm also not good at 0 to 1. So like if I'm not good at 0 to 1, which I've already done, I did it for myself, and I've achieved everything that I initially set out to achieve, what am I doing? I think people miss that contentment of like
Oh
being in
yeah.
a phase in a season of contentment. Like it's okay to kind of like not coast. You're not coasting. There's things you can improve within that business model, right? And you've seen it. Like I've gotten better at my operations. I've stayed the
Oh
same
yeah.
size, but I've gotten better with a team of like, this is what we fulfill. This is how we fulfill it. Like, like you get better at those things. You don't stay content and go backwards. If you're not moving forward, kind of like seasons, if you're not in that kind of planning and growth and harvesting phase, you're kind of in that death phase where you're kind of in the winter again. And there's a time for that, but like you need to be constantly innovating, and that's what I am good at. And so, um, I think the aha that I'm not a 0 to 1 guy, I'm a 1 to 10 guy. Um, then understanding the Hall of Fame was a really big one. The Hall of Fame was super big. Oh man, it's like I remember night as day. And then the realization that I'm a good optimizer and tinkerer was super big, which then leads into I just did an acquisition 6 months ago. I bought a business and had 9 employees. Lost 3 during the transition, not because of me buying, but just because they were already on the outs anyway.
Okay.
We replaced those people. We've netted 4 new hires on top of that, so we're up to I think 12 or 13 full time. Then we have 3 part-time and 2 contractors, so it's a team of like 17. I'm not in that day to day. I get updates on Slack just like a client. Hey, this is what we need. Occasionally I'll get a call like, hey, I need you to make a decision on something. But they only bring me 6-inch putts. They're not bringing me 0 to 1 problems. They're bringing me, and I'm helping train them like, hey, I need you, don't bring me the problem. Bring me what the problem is, but with like 2 or 3 ideas of what the solution could be. And what that's going to do is give me a frame of reference to make a quick decision. So understanding that, I'm actually realizing like we've grown the year-over-year growth since I've taken over. So I analyzed the previous owner's financials from the last 2 Januaries. Okay. And the January we just had. They did last year $220,000 in January. Good month, right? On pace for that $3 million year business, right? Slower month, right? It's not holidays. It's just coming out of the holidays. It's retail, so like it's going to be a little bit slower than the average. We did 366,000.
Wow.
So the year-over-year growth is 66.3% increase in top line. Now I don't have my numbers yet on what the net profit is. I did dump a bunch of money back into it, but it just proved that like that was a big this experience over the last 6 months has been a true realization that I'm not just a 1 to 10 guy for my clients. I'm also a 1 to 10 guy for assets that I own.
Oh yeah. Of
And
course.
so, and I actually even have even more impact because the decisions I don't have to worry about, I don't have to worry about like, hey, are they actually going to implement that thing? It's like, no, we're implementing this thing. I need you to go
Yes.
do it.
I love it.
And so hopefully that answers
Well,
that question.
it does, and I want to make sure we get a really good ending point. So give us, with this last few minutes here, give us the best hard-hitting truth bomb you can give us about the come up journey that we need to hear right now.
I was once at a a night what they called a night owl meeting. It was in my first year when I was doing the network marketing. Um, I'm going to actually give you 2. I'm going to give you a story. I'm going to give you kind of how I live my life with harmony and not balance. Um, he said he was giving a story, and he said there's so many people that they wonder why they're not successful, right? They're like, I'm doing everything, I'm doing everything, I'm doing everything. And he said, he's like, that's cool. He's like, but let me give you an analogy. He goes, if I plug in a lamp into the wall socket, and I believe I've shared this analogy with you before. If I plug this in 98% of the way to complete the circuit, because lights come on, but it's based on circuit system, right? And the desired result of the lamp is to get a result, is to have the light turn on, which would be the equivalent of you hitting your goals, right? If you do 98% and don't complete the circuit, does the light come on? And people said, it's a rhetorical question, but he's like, does it come on? And people like kind of murmured and was like, no. He goes, that's you and your business. You're 98% in. You're almost there, right? But there's one or two things that you know that you're not doing that you know you need to do that you haven't made the decision, the cost to do that. You're not willing to stay up to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to get you over the hump because I need to get my sleep, right? Um, right. And so, and here's the thing, you don't need to do that forever. It's a season of having to do that, right? To get you over that hump. And so he's like, so too many people are walking around 98% plugged in, so close to their success, but the light's still not on. It needs that 2% completion, fully plugged in, to have that light turn on and actually hit your goal. I think that was super huge for me, right? And it ties into another concept. Actually, there's three. Ties into another concept. Wherever you are, be there. Wherever you are, be there. So like if you're at work and you're dialed in and you are, it ties into the being plugged in. If you're plugged in 9 to 5 and you're not scrolling Instagram, you're not getting caught up on Facebook posts, you're not getting caught in, just checking your email 300 times, checking your Slack or your Facebook Messenger or your IG DMs or your TikTok DMs or checking LinkedIn, like you're not getting caught up in those things and you truly are plugged in, I guarantee you're gonna get your shit done. Excuse my language. Like you're gonna get it done. Um, but most people don't, and they know it. They know it consciously, subconsciously, and even in their everyday today. They know that okay, yeah, I am wasting a little bit of time here, right? The task switching, going from one thing to the next, right? Block everything out, get your most important thing done, right? So that's super big. Um, and then harmony. I don't believe life is balance. I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe that I'm a music guy. So like I look at like music like on a scale, right? There's different notes on a harmony, right? They're kind of overlapped on each other, right? But they're on different rungs on a music sheet. Okay. They're kind of like if I was to give it out for those that are not musically inclined, it's kind of like steps on a stairwell, right? That's kind of what it's like. And imagine that you have certain steps that you're on, and they're in flow, right? Well, guess what? They're on different rungs. They're on different priorities of importance, right? But when they're harmonized and they're together, it's beautiful. But
Yes.
sometimes the harmony can go in one direction, but it can also go in another direction. So sometimes in life, faith, family, fitness, friends, and finances, those 5 F's, right? Like sometimes the financial aspect is number one, sometimes then your family, and then your faith, and then your fitness, and then your friends, right? And then sometimes people that are not successful, it's their friends, it's their fitness, you know, um, leisure stuff, right? And then family, and then their faith, and then they worry about their finances. Then they wonder why they never able to hit their financial goals because they never put it in the harmony of life as a top priority, and then recalibrate and let everybody else know, or let every other priority in their life know. Hey, listen, we got to get our finances right. I'm not going to be able to hang out on Friday night. I'm not going to
Yes,
be able to go to
sacrifice.
brunch with you on Sunday. And again, this is a price that you must be willing to pay. I'm not saying you have to give it up forever and that you
No,
have to give it up
it's a
every
season.
weekend. It's a season, correct? Now, don't allow yourself to get caught up that they enforce that season to stay that season forever. That's where people
Yeah.
get caught up. They
Yeah.
force a season to stay longer than it needs to. Um, but just figuring that out. So I think harmony is super, super important. Understanding that things come in different priorities and different seasons that you're in, but you need to be plugged in all the time when you're in those seasons. That's super, super beneficial. And understanding that the path is math is super, super big.
Thank you for that last piece because that was eye-opening for me to just think that the values don't always stay the same ranking and prioritization. So don't feel guilt when you need to make those adjustments because of the greater good, right? So that was a powerful just piece right there. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And appreciate the fire. I wish we could keep going, but we will wrap it here. How can people get in touch with you? They want marketing, learn about you.
Good question. Um, they can email me, probably the fastest way. Um, be Chris at Blue Fusion, LUEFUSION media.com, bluefusionmedia.com, Chris at bluefusionmedia.com. Is the fastest way to reach me. Yeah, that'd be the fastest way.
Fantastic.
I give
All
you my
right.
number, but
Yeah, we will.
I already get like 20 phone, I already get 20 phone calls a day. So I probably wouldn't answer anyway. So just send me an email and then we'll connect.
Thanks, Chris. We'll put it in the notes as well. Appreciate you.
Awesome.
Bye.